Morning, everyone that's joining us online. Welcome to the second day of this year's 22nd Annual Security Officers Workshop here in Philadelphia. And just a couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. Everybody should know that this year, instead of getting your certificates before you leave, your certificates will be delivered online. You'll be getting an email shortly after attendance. And that email will also contain an access link to the archives of the presentations that you've seen. So you'll have 30 days to review that with your teams, and that'll be coming to you in an email shortly thereafter. And the other thing I want to tell you is that this year we just got approval the other day from the American Bankers Association subsidiary. It's called the Institute of Certified Bankers. Many of you may be familiar with that operation. They have approved our workshop this year, and you'll be getting, I believe it's about 16 credits for the two-day session that we did. If you did a three-day session, it's about 21 credits total. So very happy that we're now going to be certified through the American Bankers Association and the ICB. So without further ado, I want to jump right into today's program. Our first speaker, Mr. Luke Bencie, is President and Managing Director of Security Management International. Luke has worked at over 100 countries and has trained thousands of police, intelligence, and military officers in the United States and abroad in the field of counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and operational surveillance. He previously served on the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Emergency Support Team, and in that capacity, he was responsible for immediately responding to terrorism attacks carried out against the U.S. targets overseas, subsequently serving in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and other global hotspots. Luke's going to talk to us tonight about developing a personal protection program for your key employees in your organization. So without further ado, Mr. Luke Bencie.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone online there, too. Very honored to be here this morning in Philadelphia. When Kevin called me a couple months ago and says, hey, can you come speak at a bank security conference? I said, oh, man, I better get a suit so I look like a banker. So usually I'm much more informal when I'm dressed, but bear with me with my disguise today. So Kevin had called me and said, hey, can you come to this event? And I said, yeah, let me check the calendar. And I went and I took a look and I said, oh, that's great, it's open. And the reason it was so exciting for me is that the majority of the trips that I do are international. The majority of our business is outside of the United States. In fact, I spend about 6 months a year outside of the United States. It used to be 9 months, and then my wife threatened to leave me, so now it's down to 6. But just this year alone, I've been to 6 continents just this year, spent some time in Japan earlier this year, was down at the Rio Olympics with Azerbaijan, just came back with the wife from Australia, and so this block this time fit in well with us. In fact, next week I'll head off to Greece, I'll come home, then leave for Estonia, have Thanksgiving with the family, take off to Saudi Arabia for a couple days, come home, then go to Kathmandu, Nepal, which I've been to before, sickest place I've ever gotten, and then come home for the holidays. So when people say, oh, it sounds so exciting that you get to work in 130 countries, and I say, no, not at all. I said, let me tell you what exciting is. And I told some of these guys yesterday that I was talking to, I said, I got up yesterday morning in D.C., I called an Uber. The car came, picked me up, dropped me right at Union Station, and within 5 minutes, I was on the train. 2 minutes later, the train left, and then 90 minutes later, I was here in Philly. I said, that's exciting for me, is the fact that I don't have to go through TSA lines or worry about fluids or shoes or anything like that. So I think the glamour of travel has kind of waned over the years. So today, I'm going to be speaking to you about personal security for your executives, for your branches, how to put a program together, and specifically we'll be talking about identifying kidnap, ransom, and extortion threats. Now, I fully realize that the physical threats towards banks has dropped over the years, the actual physical break-in robberies, and has been replaced by the cyber crimes, the hacking, the social engineering, the skimming, all of that. But nonetheless, because of the active shooter threat and how that's evolved, and there was a great presentation on that yesterday, there still needs to be a personal security plan in place for that. So here's just a quick quote. No person should ever have to wait until they see a gun to know that a threat is present. And this is from Patrick Van Horn, who actually wrote a book, Left of Bang. And if you're familiar maybe with a military term, if you're right of bang, it means after the event has unfolded, so you want to be able to identify a situation left of bang or prior to something going wrong. And this is actually the U.S. Marine Corps, after the first few years in Iraq and Afghanistan, realized that, hey, they need to do something to improve situational awareness. Quick story. About 10 years ago, I was in the West African country of Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire for you French speakers out there. I was in Ivory Coast. It was about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was coming back from an official function. I was in the back of a taxi cab, had a couple drinks. It was a nice night. I had the window rolled down because there's no ACs in cabs in Africa, and the smell is not that good, so you want the air flowing. It was late. It was a nice night. I was looking out at the stars and bright skies, and proceeded just to kind of, lull into sleep in the back of the taxi cab. I suddenly find that I'm getting poked in the arm with something, and I wake up from the back of the taxi, and it was an AK-47. It was a gun being jammed into my shoulder. And I realized that we had come to a police checkpoint over on the Charles de Gaulle Bridge over the lagoon there in Ivory Coast, in Abidjan. So I realized, okay, this is a police officer. Well, this could be good or bad in West Africa, being stopped by the police. So he starts yelling in French, which I do not speak. So I say, no, English, parlez-vous anglais, and we begin to try to communicate in English. But basically he tells me to get out of the car, so I get out of the car, my hands are up. I mean, that's the most important thing, is to make sure your hands are exposed to the officer. And essentially he says, oh, well, you are out past our curfew in the country, so you are going to have to pay a ticket, a fine right now. Well, there is no curfew in the country, first of all. So I know immediately that this is just going to be a typical shakedown. Okay, fine, I get it. I mean, it's part of the situational awareness. You need to know these type of things happen. So the next thing that's going through my mind as I'm waking up out of my sleep is I'm starting to say, is this officer, is he high, stoned, drunk? Because over there, they chew khat, the root and everything like that, as a narcotic, and they have a tendency to get stoned. So I realized, okay, I'm looking at his eyes while my hands are up. Okay, it doesn't look like his eyes are bloodshot. Okay, he seems to be sober enough that maybe I can reason with him. The next thing I was doing, I was looking down at his AK, which was now slung down over his body, and I was looking to see, is there a magazine even in the AK? Because a lot of times in these African countries, they will not provide military or law enforcement with actual bullets because they're afraid of a coup, so it's always just a show. But sure enough, there was a magazine in there, and then I looked to see if is the safety on or is the safety off? And the safety was off, so it's just, if there was a bullet, it would just be a trigger squeeze away. So I didn't want to do anything stupid to excite this person more than that. So while my hands are still up, I explained to him that I'm a diplomat and I've got diplomatic identification. He's demanding ID. So for any of you who've been to Africa, you know all your shirts in Africa, your pockets are in the front. You always have shirts in the front in Africa for a couple reasons. One, if you keep your pockets down here, the little kids, they come and swarm you in mobs, and then their hands are in their pockets. You don't even feel it, and they take your wallet, your cash, and all of that. So all of your cash is always in your front pocket. The other thing is, too, if you start making a dumb reach or move, oh, my ID, yeah, sure, and I reach back here, who knows what this guy could do? He could think I'm reaching for a weapon. So in Africa, hands are up, unbutton the pocket. With this hand, I hand him my diplomatic passport. He still doesn't seem to be grasping the fact that what he's doing is wrong, and he's still demanding that I am not going to leave the checkpoint until I pay him some cash. I get that. So I reach into the other pocket, and I say, how much is the fine? Which he understands, says, well, how much you got? So whatever I had in my shirt pocket, I took it out, and I handed it to him. The other thing that I kept in my front shirt pocket as well was a notepad with a little mini pen, and I take it out, and he sees that I'm doing this, so I'm not making any sudden moves, and I say to him, I say, officer, you're doing a great job. You really are. I mean, this is great. You're enforcing the law. In fact, tomorrow, our U.S. ambassador is going to have lunch with your president. And what I would like to do right now is I'm going to be in that meeting, by the way, and I'm going to take your name down and tell the president that you did a fantastic job of enforcing the law, enforcing the curfew in this country, and all of this. I said, what is your name? And he's just kind of looking at me. He said, your name. So he gives me his name, or he gets that, and I write it down. So then he goes and he talks to the taxi driver in the front of the car and kind of says, hey, what's this American talking about? And so the taxi driver, who speaks pretty good English, explains what's being said. And the next thing you know, the cash is handing back, and he's giving me a siren on his motorcycle escort back to my hotel, goes in, salutes, and everything like that. So situational awareness. So you say, okay, neat story. What's the point of this? How does this relate to domestic bank situational awareness? I will get to that, I promise. Okay. So talking about domestic bank robberies. These are some statistics from the FBI here. 2014, 3,961 robberies, up a little over 100. In 2015, the 2016 statistics I couldn't find online. I'm sure I would defer to you for whatever your FBI liaison contact is for what those numbers would be this year. Okay. So just a few famous cases. So I try to dig in this to do a little research on what are the actual kidnap, ransom, and extortion threats to the banking industry. And this is sort of what I came up with, and I'm sure a lot of you will maybe have more stories. But the first one of the most famous ones that kept coming up was the Love Connection abduction cases in Tennessee, where they were taking bank executives' families, taking a child, whatever, hostage, and saying, hey, bank executive, I need you to go in, make a big withdrawal if you want all your kids to have all their fingers, things like this. In cases in Connecticut, California, and Tennessee, there were the incidents where the family members that were taken were strapped with explosives. Now, I think in every one of the cases it was not real explosives. I think they were inert, but I still don't think anybody wants anything that looks like an explosive strapped to them. More serious note, Dan Short was a bank president. This was several years ago in Arkansas. Bank manager, he was taken into the bank I don't think it was over the weekend, but they took him into the bank. They made him make a large withdrawal, and then they found his body the next day in a lake in Arkansas. This goes back 20 years, but it brings up a good point. Bank branch manager's family was selling a puppy in the newspaper. A criminal came to the door, used that as a way to gain access to the family, tied up the family, and then had the bank executive go and make withdrawals of large deposits of cash. Now, that was 1995. Long time ago. That's when we were still using newspapers. The internet wasn't even around then. But think of today, Craigslist and all these things where you're selling something, you're inviting someone to your house, your social media postings that, oh, I'll be here, I'm going there, this is where I am right now. My brother-in-law sold a guitar. He's a musician. He sold a guitar off Craigslist, one of these things, and told the guy, hey, $500, come to the house. Guy called him up, came to the house, and the guy handed my brother-in-law a check. And my brother said, hey, sorry, man, cash only. And the guy goes, oh, cash only, and pulled out a gun and says, now you're going to give me the guitar, and then took the guitar from that way. So it would have been very easy for him just to push his way into the house if that's what he had desired to do. And then a more large-scale crime, the Northern Bank in Belfast, two executives' family members were taken, held hostage, and that resulted in a crime of $50 million U.S. Okay, so what do all of these events have in common? There actually is stuff that is in common, but usually it comes after the fact. And that's 90% of all the victims recall later saying, oh my gosh, yes, there was something suspicious that I should have recognized, that I should have paid attention to. Now, this is what's known as the criminal planning cycle. You also see this now, the terrorist planning cycle. The criminal terrorist cycle and the terrorist planning cycle are actually very similar. They both start with target selection. Target selection of a terrorist target or a bank or a particular employee usually starts online surveillance. Again, it starts with the social media. It starts with LinkedIn. I can tell you, as someone who worked in the intelligence community, LinkedIn is a great tool for identifying targets, whether they know it or not. From target selection, it then goes into the planning phase. The planning phase, doing surveillance, casing, probing, doing walk-up attempts, doing general surveillance, and then it goes into logistics and deployment of the actual crime. So the thing that's in common with all of these is there's some kind of surveillance that's being done. So the concept here that we're trying to get across is to be able to put in a security plan that teaches employees what to look for, what is suspicious, what is above or below the normal baseline, to be able to determine if this is something that should be reported or something that should be followed. Okay? So what I'm going to talk about this morning are the following topics. I'm going to start off with the Cooper Color Code, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'll go over that very quickly. And then I'll get into behavior observation, baselines and anomalies, the 6 domains of decision making, surveillance recognition, which I think you'll enjoy. I'll give you a lot of tips of how surveillance is actually done from the criminal standpoint against you, so maybe you can recognize what somebody's doing. And then finally, just some tips for protecting yourself, your employees, and your family. Okay, so we'll start with the Cooper Color Code system. If you're familiar with this, Jeff Cooper, former Marine colonel, invented this. He's the one who put in all the shooting tactics for the Marines and everything. But he basically said that the top 2 inches of your head are the greatest weapon that you have. Your ability to analyze a situation, to make smart decisions, to observe what's going on, that's the greatest friend that you have, whether you're in a hostile situation or just your day-to-day lives. Okay? So here's how that system breaks out. When you're in color code white, you are completely unprepared and unready to take action. That's me in Africa. I'm sitting in the back of the car. I have no idea. Somebody could stick a gun in. Somebody could come and rob me. The taxi driver could just drive to the side of the road somewhere and just mug me, take my money, leave me for dead, anything like that. Pure condition white. That's what I was in. Then you've got yellow. Yellow is where you should be operating every day. You should start your day in yellow. You're prepared, but you're alert, and you're also relaxed as you're going through. I mean, you don't have to be all high-strung throughout your day. It's a good situational awareness. And then there's orange. You're alert to more probable danger. This is that feeling in your stomach. This is that sense. The hair starts standing up. Something is not right here. And then you get into red. Red is your action mode. This is something's going down. You have to make a decision. And this is where we get into the fight or flight response. And again, this could be an active shooter situation. And then black. Black was never in the original Cooper Color Code. It was only added after. I mean, this was for military personnel here. They should never be in black, where there's a complete breakdown of physical or mental performance. This does happen, though. And I'll give you an example. There were some missionaries in Sri Lanka who were taken by the Tamil Tigers, the guerrilla group out there. Took a group of missionaries, and there was a male in the group who, when he had a gun pointed in his face for the first time, he just locked up. He froze. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He could barely walk. He couldn't take directions. While the females, who also had never been in that situation before, handled it much better than he did, and he became such a liability on the group moving through the jungles that the Tigers just said, hey, this guy, they just put a bullet in him. They said, no, this guy's, he can't even move. He's a statue right now. So you never want to find yourself in black. You want to do something, and we'll talk about that something. So the predator mindset. The bad guys are looking at you. They're assessing you. They're assessing your bank. They're assessing your family, your day-to-day lives. What are they looking for? Well, number one, it's the general appearance. Do you look vulnerable? Do you look weak? Do you have vulnerabilities that they can exploit? Are you wealthy? I can't believe I'm saying this right now, but the Kardashian who takes $11 million worth of diamonds to a foreign country and then posts online, I'm here, my kids are here. I mean, is there any wonder that they think bad guys don't monitor these type of situations? Nationality. Again, I've been to 130 countries, and I hate to say this, but Americans are probably some of the most naive travelers around the globe. We really are not good at situational awareness when we travel. We think, you know, hey, oh, this is so nice, we're on vacation, oh, this person talking to me, what a nice, friendly person. No, he's a scammer who's setting you up for something else. Unprepared, vulnerable, again, this is someone who goes out and drinks, who gives into vices, things like that, gambles. It can happen to me. I see this all the time. If you remember, 20, 25 years ago, the kids, remember, used to backpack through Europe. That was the big thing to do. You'd backpack through, and you had their American flag patch on the back of your bag, and you'd talk with the British kids, the Swedish kids, the German kids, and all of that. And you have this mindset, oh, gosh, we're just kids backpacking through Europe. Nothing's going to happen to us. This is great. It's Europe. It's safe. And then the last one, confidence. This is from the predator's mindset. Confidence of no prosecution. So in Brazil, we have my wife's Brazilian, and we have an office down there. We're down there all the time. In Brazil, you have a better than 90% chance of getting away with murder down there. So basically, it's less than 10%. You kill somebody, and you got a better than 90% chance you will get away with it. The police will not catch you. So think about this now. You're robbing a bank. You're robbing someone at an ATM. You're the bad guy. You're the predator. You're saying, all right, so I'm going to rob her as she's at the ATM. Well, if I leave her alive, she can identify me, and then my odds of getting caught are better. So you know what? I'm just going to kill her. So that's the kind of mindset that your enemies could be in. And the criminals read our body language. They read our Cooper color code just as we do. So even if you're, a small person or whatever, you can still carry yourself and not be the target as someone who's big or who's taller, but yet is in a state of white. Okay? So basically, your color state determines whether or not you're going to be a target. Okay? Here's just a few examples of condition white. Woman talking on the phone, unprepared to take action. Condition yellow, this is where you should start your days. So you see here, you see this woman here, okay, she's clutching her bag with one hand, seems to be alert, she has another hand free if anything comes up. And then you got the millennial here. What are they? Kids face down in the phone, just going through life looking like that. Anybody could come and rob them. And again, I said that we do a lot in Brazil. In Brazil, if ever you see a woman walking on the street in Brazil, and some of you ladies may do this already, they will always walk against traffic on a sidewalk. So in other words, nobody can come up on a road behind them from a van or something like that, pull them into a van. The bag is always slung across their body with the purse side facing a building, never facing a street. Nobody in Brazil carries a cell phone like this. It's always through the headphones, and the headphones are always run through the bottom of the shirt and comes out this way because somebody could come by on a motorcycle, a motorbike, and just yank them right off. And iPhones, there's no Apple in Brazil because of the socialist rules down there. They don't allow it. So it's a high. If you think iPhones and Samsungs are expensive here, try going into some of these countries with protective economies that don't allow that. It really becomes a target. And when we took people down, Olympic sponsors down for the Rio Games, and that was the hardest thing that we had to do, was to educate these people. Don't be using the ATM machines. White-collar crimes, skimmers are on every single ATM. Don't walk around with your iPhones. Leave the jewelry at home. All of these things. Condition orange. Condition orange, this is something's not right. Something is out of the baseline of the norm, so you're a little bit on edge, you're alert, you know what's going on. And then red. Red is, again, like I said, the fight or flight. Now, I'm a natural-born coward. I prefer to run than engage with any kind of physical confrontation or situation. But the point is, when you're in condition red, do something. Do something, even if it does mean running, screaming, kicking, whatever. Do something. They say in most kidnapping situations, your best chance of escape is right at the point when somebody grabs you. The bad guy is hoping, sometimes expecting, that you're just going to give in and get into that van or whatever it is. They're just going to allow themselves to push in the house. That's what they're expecting. If you fight back, you scream, you do anything, you surprise them. And now you change the tables, even if it's slightly, you're doing something. And again, black is just pure panic. It's just, you can't do anything. And again, who's to say, depending on the situation, what you would do? I mean, you always think that you would do something. You always try to prepare, you always train for the worst, but you never really know what you're going to do until you're put in that situation. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about how you improve your observational skills here. So we're basically going to talk about identifying your threats based on the cues from things that you see in your everyday lives. So you can use 4 specific skills for this. The first one is your situational awareness. The next is the sensitivity to baselines and anomalies, which is very prevalent and something that you can build into your bank programs. Your critical thinking, and then your decision making, and I'll go over these. So the first one, behavioral or situational awareness, knowing the environment and the people around you. I mentioned that my wife is Brazilian. My wife was actually a police officer in Brazil. She comes from a police family. Then she went to work. She actually worked for ESPN. She was the head of security for international security for ESPN. So she's very savvy. She's much more savvy even than I am. In fact, she yells at me. She says, hey, when you're in the United States, you are conditioned white and yellow. She says, yeah, when you're overseas, you're a different guy. But when you're in the U.S., you're just too comfortable in the U.S. and you don't pay attention to things that are going on around you. And that's probably true. I spend so much time in war zones and hotspots that when I come to the U.S., I'm like, I'm in the Marriott in Philadelphia. What could happen to me here? You know, and you don't think about that. Where she, on the other hand, is always alert. And a perfect example, we were in São Paulo, Brazil, and we were coming from a dinner. And if you ever spend time in Latin America, you know that a dinner in Latin America doesn't start till about 11 p.m. And usually goes into and this is like on a Monday or Tuesday night, you know, and then you're expected to be at work at 8 a.m. But it was 4 a.m., and we were coming back from a restaurant. My wife was driving, because I do not drive in São Paulo. I've driven in Afghanistan. I've driven in Iraq. I will not drive in São Paulo. It's that dangerous. So she's driving, and I'm in the passenger seat. And again, I'm in my conditioned white phase. You must think this is all I do. I'm sleeping in the right-hand passenger seat. And suddenly, my wife turns the wheel hard, jumps over the median into oncoming traffic, pulls the wheel back, and then continues to drive straight as nothing happened, and then just starts changing some songs on the radio. I wake up, what are you doing? What's going on? What's going on? And she says, oh, don't worry about it. Just a couple guys came up on a motorcycle next to our window, and the guy in the back pulled a gun. And as soon as he pulled the gun, I just ran him off the road into oncoming traffic. I said, is he dead? I don't know. And she just kept going. And I said, well, how did you know that this was coming? And she says, everybody in Brazil knows. When you see two people on a motorcycle, the first guy is the driver, the back guy is the guy who points the gun and makes the robbery. Dummy, what do you mean, you know? So, okay, you know. But, again, situational awareness. Driving down the road, saw two guys on a motorcycle coming up on her one side. She was prepared. She went from condition orange, she made a decision, went to condition red, and then she suddenly went to yellow and started playing with the radio. So it just comes with the culture and the environment. Okay, your critical thinking. No two situations are ever alike. You can practice. You can study case studies. All of these kind of things. It's kind of like that old saying that Dwight Eisenhower said. He said, you know, plans are useless. The first time you hear a gunshot, your plan goes out the window. But your planning is indispensable. So even though you rehearse, you plan, you do tabletop exercises, chances are the exact same scenario you rehearsed for is not going to happen. But at least you've planned and you'll be able to improvise on the fly with a lot more comfort. And the most important thing to see on this slide here is this one here, is in the critical thinking phase, it's the idea of getting off the X. Now this is a term that really originated with Iraq and Afghanistan. And the whole idea is, they say, listen, we're going to give you all this great training, but I want you to remember, if you are ever in a point where you're driving down the road and your convoy hits an IED, or suddenly your helicopter crashes, or somebody shoots out your tires, remember one thing, if nothing else, get off the X, which basically means move. Because if you sit there and do nothing, you are now a magnet for trouble. Bullet magnet, whatever it is. If you move, even if you get the tires shot out of your car, you hit an IED and your car can still run, continue to drive that car. Because you are being the bad guy puts you in what's known as a kill box. You're driving across the road, boom, they hit it, cars are disabled, and all the firefights start. But if you start moving, you suddenly disrupted their plans. The more that you move from the X, the greater your chances of survival and success. Right? So always think, teacher employees, if something goes down, do something, move, get off the X. And again, we talked about the freeze, flight, or fight. Again, you don't have to teach anybody in your office to suddenly do martial arts. I'm not saying anything like that. Just have a plan. Even if that plan includes something else on here, barricading themselves into a room. Baselines and anomalies. Okay, establishing norms from other behaviors. So again, this is taking a snapshot of a situation, looking at it, analyzing it and deciding if everything is okay or if something's slightly off. And there's a great movie that is actually shown in like Intel training courses. Do you remember the movie with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt? It was called Spy Game. And it came out, I think, in like 2000 or 2001. It was like a pre-9/11 movie. But there's a great scene when Robert Redford is this old CIA case officer, station chief, and he's teaching a young Brad Pitt about how to understand his situational awareness. And they're in West Germany during the 80s, as the movie set. And Robert Redford tells the young kid, they're sitting at a restaurant, and he goes, every room that you walk into should be a snapshot. You should be looking at it, you should be assessing it, and dismissing most of it without even thinking about it. It should become as natural as breathing for you. And that's what we're talking about when we're setting a baseline of what the room is, and then what anomalies enter into that picture. So again, you've got the baseline is something breaking that base. So for example, excuse me, take a look at this picture here. What do you see? What's the baseline? If you saw this every day outside of your window, what is the baseline that you're looking at here? Everybody's looking straight ahead. What else? Everybody's moving in one direction, right? The shopping is on the sides. The middle is left over just for one-way movement. So what would be an anomaly of that? Suddenly somebody stops in the middle, somebody turns in the middle, somebody drops down to tie a shoe in the middle. That's what we mean by an anomaly within a baseline. Same thing here. Okay, you're looking at this picture. Okay, you've got the train station. Most of the people, your baseline is, hey, it looks like they're carrying hand luggage or very, very simple light luggage with them. Everybody seems to be moving. Nobody seems really to be settled down. What if you saw a bag just laying there? That's your anomaly. You see somebody sitting on the floor. That's an anomaly. That should raise you to the next color level. Okay? Another example here, I love the Bourne movies. I think they're really great, but I thought this was funny. If you go to some of these Middle Eastern countries, you have to be culturally aware of the baseline as well. So if you go to the Middle East, everybody is doing that to you. I mean, there is this intrusion of space, personal privacy. When you're over there, people will, I mean, they'll flat out stare you up and down all day long. And if you say, excuse me, that's rude, you're staring at me, they'll just continue to stare at you all day long. So you have to understand it within cultural context as well. Here's another one. Everybody's moving through the queues and suddenly somebody underneath. So if you put this in terms of your bank and training your people, you say, okay, what's your baseline? Everybody comes in and out of the bank. There's a system. Now somebody comes in and, well, they don't come in. They stay outside the window. They're just sort of loitering outside of the window, and maybe they're on a phone. Okay, does that break the baseline? Is that an anomaly? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're just waiting for their spouse or somebody who's maybe parking the car. But now, let's say they come, they're loitering outside the bank, and they have a big bag, a big satchel. Okay, does that break the baseline? Now, let's say they come into the bank, but instead of going right to the teller window, they suddenly go right to the bathroom. Things like this. Little things like this should break the anomaly and should take you up to a next level. And it's not just the security people in the bank. It should be every person in the bank should be aware of what's the baseline in the bank, what could be considered an anomaly, and as soon as they see something like that happen, boom, everybody's jumping up to the next color level just in case. Okay, 6 domains of making quick decisions. Okay, so these are sort of the personal cues that can help you, and these are great for security. This is great for anything you do in life, dealing with your kids, playing poker, whatever it is. So the first one, kinesics. So kinesics is sort of the telltale lies. If anybody here plays poker, you know when you play poker, you're always looking for that guy across the table. What's his tell? What's he do subconsciously when he bluffs? So we worked a lot with the Customs and Border people at JFK, and they would tell us how they would spot people when they come in and lie into the airport. So they would say to people, foreigners, or not foreigners or Americans, they say, sir, what is the purpose of your business today here in New York City? And if it was men, the number one telltale sign for men who were lying or acting suspicious, the men would go right for their temple and start scratching their temple as they gave the answer to the officer. For women, if they had a necklace, they'd do this thing where they'd run their finger across their necklace, or they might go and stroke their neck a little bit. And again, it wasn't a flat-out lie, but it meant they were nervous about something, okay? Another thing with kinesics and everything is they would say to a foreigner, they would say, where are you coming from today? Oh, I'm coming from London, or I'm coming from Germany today. Well, where's Germany? Here, there. I mean, this doesn't do. What it is it's a subconscious thing that if we don't want to have eye contact because you're intimidating me, I may point my finger in a direction hoping that your eyes will follow my finger instead. It's a subconscious thing that we do. And one other thing too, Americans, when we lie, and again, not everybody, but again, according to the Customs and Border people here, your U.S. taxpayer at work, if you say the word just, this is known to be a telltale sign of somebody who might be lying. So if you say, sir, why are you withdrawing $20,000 from the bank today? Oh, I just need it because I'm wiring it to my wife. I'm just. You use the word just in your sentence. That's what they say. I don't know. Biometric cues. This is more of the things that you can't control with your body reaction. This is like when you sweat, you get that vein in your head that starts to throb when you're scared or nervous. You get the Jimmy arm or the Jimmy leg. You know, when you get scared, you start to shake a little bit. Proxemics. This is when somebody gets close to you. And again, this is culturally, you have to put it in the context of the culture you're in. In the Middle East or in India, people will stand this close to your face, strangers. And you're like that, you know. But to them, it's all perfectly well and natural. In the Middle East, men, if they like you, will grab your hand and hold your hand with you as you walk down the street. So every culture is slightly different. Other cultures, we in the United States, we like to have a 2-foot, 3-foot standoff distance with people. We like our little bubble of space. But when you go to Japan, there is no bubble of space. It's people are on you. They're physically touching you when you're on the subway. Geographics. Now, geographics is sort of that, we've all seen it, we're all driving, we're lost, and we end up in the wrong neighborhood, and suddenly you're like, you know what, this is not the right place that we should be right now. That's geographics. Okay? Iconography. This is, and I think somebody talked about it yesterday, your graffiti that you see on the wall, the tagging or things that are marked. And a really good example I have of this is, I used to spend a lot of time in Lebanon, in Beirut. And if you drive in southern Beirut's a wonderful country, I mean, one of the most beautiful places in the world. But when you start driving to southern Beirut, you get into the Hezbollah-controlled zones. And the way that you can quickly distinguish that is you start seeing the Hezbollah charity boxes along the side of the road. Every few hundred meters, you see it. And then you see this 10-foot cutout of Ayatollah Khomeini on the side of the road. And then you start realize, hey, yeah, we should be reading the signs here. This is not where we want to be right now. Okay? And then the last thing is atmospherics. And atmospherics is something that was really brought into a lot of the military folks. If you were in Iraq or Afghanistan, you were driving a convoy, well, you would see the kids kicking the soccer ball every day. You'd see the men baking bread. The women would be, cleaning clothes or something like that. And you did this on a routine time every day. But then one day you drive down the street and nobody's out there, and you're thinking, okay, why aren't the kids kicking the soccer ball? Why isn't the guy making bread over here? It's because the locals know something you don't. Something in the atmospherics is off. There could be an ambush or something coming. We need to get off this road, or we need to turn around, whatever it is. Okay? So those are your sort of 6 domains, your 6 cues to help you out. Okay? Deciding to act now. So let's say you see these cues. What is your decision to act? Are you going to, they say the rule of 3. You see 3 anomalies, and then that should be the decision and act. Well, in some cases, all it takes is 1. It really depends on the situation. If you see somebody coming in and you think that you see the print or the outline of a weapon underneath their shirt as they're in the bank, that might be your only anomaly that you need to elevate up or do something. You don't need to maybe wait for 2 more things to happen to confirm that you're in a tough situation. All right, so now I want to jump just a little bit into the kidnapping portion. And again, kidnappings are down, relatively speaking, in the United States. Even in Central America, they're really down. It used to be Central and South America, Mexico. These were really, you used to see them all the time in the 90s movies, the Russell Crowe one with Meg Ryan, the Proof of Life movie. So it doesn't happen as often like that to foreign executives, and certainly not as much in the United States, but a trend that is picking up, it's a huge trend right now in Latin America, is the express kidnappings, or what they call the lightning kidnappings. And all that essentially is, somebody goes up to an ATM, and a guy walks up behind him and says, hey, let's go, empty it out. Now we're going to walk over here and we're going to use your credit card. My sister-in-law in Brazil, in São Paulo, has been kidnapped twice. Same thing. She just going down the street, gang of guys came up. It started with a woman, and we'll talk about that. A female approached her first to gain her confidence, to put her guard down, to drop her into condition, yellow or white. And then she started talking with this woman. Van comes up, two guys with guns put her in the van. And they say, okay, let's go through the purse. And they started hitting every ATM. Now, in that country, there's limits to how much you can take out every day because this is such a big problem. You can only take out $200 a day, max, and all ATMs across the country shut down, I think, at 8 p.m., and they don't reopen until 6. So after they do the max on the ATM cards, which people have multiple banks because they can't just take out $200 a day, so they bank at like 5 or 6 different institutions so they can get extra cash if they need it. Then they go into the store, and then they start using the credit cards, and it's the same thing. And then when it's done, when everything's maxed out, they drove my sister-in-law on both occasions up to the favelas, to basically the slums or the shanty towns part of Brazil. They drive her up there, and then they just kick her out of the car, and then she has to find her way back down, find somebody to borrow a phone to call family and come meet her somewhere. So she was lucky she wasn't raped or killed or anything like that, but you can see what an easy crime that is, and nobody really cares about their faces being seen or anything like that. I mean, the technology's not there to identify like we have here in the United States, but again, it's a concern, it's a threat. So the positives of kidnappings, if there is that you're going to have a 90% survival rate if you are kidnapped, all right? That's the good news. It's in the kidnapper's best interest to keep you alive. You are a bargaining chip, a negotiation chip for them. What you want to do is, they always tell you, the first thing, if somebody gets in your house, abducts you, anything like that, takes you ransom because they want your family member to get money out of the bank, build a rapport. You have to show that you're a human being with this person. Don't sit there and curse this person out. Oh, you bastard, how could you do this to me, you loser. As much as you want to say that, build rapport with your captor. Show them that you're a human being first, okay? When you do that, they will start building a trust with you, and it will give you more of an opportunity if you get the chance to escape later. The negatives of a kidnapping is possible execution. Again, it's a very rare case. There was the case that we showed at the very beginning with the one bank executive in Arkansas. But you could be in captivity, very uncomfortable for extended periods of time, taped up, bound for extended periods. Sexual violence is always, a reality of it. Mental disorders that come from being in this kind of situation. And I think that Tamia really gave a great example yesterday, and I'll jump into Stockholm Syndrome later, but how you really do become reliant upon your captor, and they find ways mentally to play with your mind. And then lack of proper nutrition or medical attention. Now, in the banking world, or at least we see in the movies, hostage or siege situations always seem to be more prevalent. The difference really between a hostage situation and a kidnapping is a hostage situation, time is on your side in a hostage situation. The more time that passes in a hostage situation, the better your chances of survival. Whereas a kidnapping, it could be the opposite. Okay? So if we talk about the phases of a kidnapping, this is what they go through if they're looking to identify you or one of your family members. Number one, they're selecting a target, and they're selecting the attack site. Does anybody know, overwhelmingly across the world, and this is what is taught to all U.S. diplomats or U.S. personnel that go overseas, where do you think the number one place is that you are surveilled? At home. Yeah, you're home. 6 a.m., leaving the house. That's the number one spot, overwhelming statistically, where you'll be seen leaving your house. Now, that may not be the place where they do an abduction. There may be a choke point or something along your route that they would get you, but that's the number one spot that it would start. Okay? Then they want to isolate the attack site. which again could be a choke point. It's a one-way in, one-way out. It's a place where they could push you into a van, whatever it is. Then they want to neutralize any kind of security, anything that you might have on you or any people you're with. Now, at this point, again, we said this is the time that you or your family members want to try to escape, is during the actual abduction. This is your best, I don't want to say it's your last chance, but it's your best chance to be free. Okay? The captors will then take you from the attack site. They'll then transport you to a secure location, a bank, an ATM, someplace, a shopping mall, someplace where they can use a credit card. You'll have to follow through with their objectives, withdrawal of money, ransom, and then hopefully they will release you. If not, then it falls into escape or rescue. Okay? If it is a rescue situation, this is one of the second likeliest place that you would get injured or harmed, and that's if the police are coming through the door in your bank, whatever it is. If the police come through to help out your situation in the bank, stay on the floor with your hands out. Don't try to assist the police. Don't stand up and say, "That's the guy over there," because you don't know what could happen to you in return. The police are going to be a little bit jittery coming in, so just stay on the floor. Don't try to help. Keep your hands visible and empty. As I mentioned, with Tamia's great talk yesterday about Stockholm Syndrome, this is a hostage from Flight 847, TWA, if you remember that. One of the hostages came out and said, "Oh, they weren't bad people. They let me eat. They let me sleep. These guys weren't bad." So they fall into this dependency upon their kidnappers. And then, of course, Patty Hearst, probably the most famous case of Stockholm Syndrome. Okay? So now, with the time we got left, I want to talk a little bit about surveillance. So again, as we said, 90% of the cases where there was a bank robbery, 90% of the time there were some indicators ahead of time. Usually it deals with surveillance. And the different type of surveillances that you have are active surveillance or mobile. This means somebody's either following you in a car or perhaps on foot. You may have what's called passive or fixed surveillance. This could be somebody, staking out your house, staking out your bank. They're across the street at a fixed location, across the street in a window. They're setting up a cart, a hot dog stand, a shoe shine stand, whatever, across from your bank or location. Zonal, this is where, as if you're driving to work in the morning, you drive through different zones, and a different team or different person puts eyes on you as you move through that zone. There's a technical one where somebody could slap. Nowadays, you can track your kids with their iPhones. It used to be you'd have to put these big blocks, slap on people's cars to track them. Nowadays, it's easy. You can get any of these spy little gadget shops, buy things smaller than this remote that you can slap on a car and track somebody's location that way. And then there's a combination of all of these. Okay? Surveillance is either done overtly or discreetly. The good news is, domestically here in the United States, chances are that if somebody's doing surveillance against your home, your bank, anything like that, they're probably going to be somewhat amateurish, that there should be better indicators for you if you know what to look for. Okay? So what are you looking for? So you're looking for people who are checking their watches as you go past them. As you go by, they immediately get on the cell phone to make a call. Anything that doesn't look normal. Strange calls that you may get on the telephone at odd hours where people hang up. The person doing surveillance is not going to be like something out of a CIA movie where he's in a trench coat and a hat. Although I will tell you a funny story. I was in Turkmenistan a dozen or so years ago. Now, Turkmenistan, if you don't know, it's one of the old Soviet republics that lasted after the fall of the Soviet Union. And the leader, Turkmenbash, he's dead now, but he was behind Kim Jong-un at the time, and Saddam Hussein for the most icons of him, statues of him. Every home had to have a picture of him, every school, I mean, you name it. I mean, he was really an eccentric guy. But I remember I went into the country, and it's like something out of an old Dr. Zhivago Soviet movie. I mean, that's how backwards and lost in time this country is. But I would come down to breakfast in this old hotel, and there would be a guy, big Russian guy, the mustache, the handlebar mustache, the hat, the suit, the old 80s clothes, reading the paper, just like something out of a movie. And then I'd go out, he'd follow me. I'd go to a restaurant, he'd come into the restaurant, So in some places, it's going to be that easy, but in your cases, probably not. Okay, surveillance is not always conducted alone. There's this image, this stereotype that it's going to be one guy parked in a car right across from your bank keeping eyes on you. Not really, okay? Surveillance, when two males are conducting surveillance, it's a little bit more high profile, okay? It's going to draw your attention. It's going to break your baseline. Two guys walking outside your bank is going to be an anomaly, maybe. A male-female might not be. They could just pretend to be a couple, holding hands, whatever it is. But it's got to be culturally acceptable. In the U.S., a man and a woman together, culturally acceptable. Two females are virtually invisible. I used to work on a government surveillance team. The best surveillance people we had were these two little old ladies who worked as a team. They walked dogs, all this kind of stuff. They could go anywhere, get anywhere, take pictures, you name it. So two women in general, are better at conducting surveillance than men. And then as a group, that can be sometimes advantageous. So let's say there's a group of people outside your window, whatever they're doing, playing soccer, playing basketball. I mean, we've used that as a cover and stuff before as well. And you can basically get away with whatever you're doing. Okay, you don't want to make assumptions of females, of elderly people, kids, taxi drivers, any of these. Mentally unstable or handicapped. It's funny, right after 9/11, the U.S. Capitol Police started using, there's a lot of homeless in Washington, D.C., so the U.S. Capitol Police started using undercover officers dressed as homeless people to go hang out in front of like the Capitol and the monuments and stuff in D.C., and what they found was the homeless guys are very territorial. So if an officer would go lay on a park bench, for a few hours, an actual homeless would come up with his group of guys and start kicking them and saying, hey, this is our spot and everything. Don't underestimate them, but it's for sure. And then I've been to Morocco more times than I can count, and the Moroccans always use shoe shine people. Every single shoe shine person has a cell phone that's provided by the government. Mexico's the same thing. You go to Mexico, every shoe shine kid is provided with a little cell phone from a narcotics dealer. And the narcotics dealer tells them, hey, if you see a gringo or you see law enforcement coming by, you pick up that phone, you just hit speed dial #1, and if you're right, you're going to get a nice toy the next day. So all the shoe shine kids in Mexico are in on, looking for doing counter surveillance. Okay, a few more indicators. The banana team, this is something that if you see outside, let's say you're in your bank and you see two people and they look like complete strangers standing on the opposite side of the street. We call this the banana team. This guy's over here, he's doing his surveillance. That guy's over there, he's doing that surveillance. And then all of a sudden they start talking, and then they come together, talk, and then they split and go back again. That's called the banana team. They're supposed to be complete strangers. They're not supposed to be working together. Something happens that they have to come and communicate, and then they split back apart, and then they're strangers again. The cockroach, this is one of those things, you go outside of your property, and all of a sudden the people who are there, they just scatter like cockroaches. They just take off in the other direction. They get they just turn and walk away real quick. The ostrich, this is this guy. This is the real amateur who's going to be standing behind a post or something, kind of doing one of those, thinking that nobody sees him. The voice of God. This is great. This is probably one of the most realistic things that happens with real-life surveillance teams. And I'm so happy that James Bond movie did this in Casino Royale. At the very beginning of the movie, the guy's touching his ear. Daniel Craig is talking to his buddy as they're doing surveillance. And the guy says, what did you say? And James Bond keeps saying, stop touching your ear. And then sure enough, the bad guy sees this guy touching his ear, and he knows that he's under surveillance. And then the last one is the deer in the headlights. And again, this is one of those movements that, you turn the corner, you catch somebody, and what do? They go wide-eyed, like, oh gosh, you caught me, and their eyes just naturally go wide in there, okay? A few things with vehicles, repeated times, locations. Vehicles are a little bit easier to identify, believe it or not. Watch for people who are parked in key locations. Ask the questions, why is that vehicle parked outside of our bank? Why has that vehicle been there? And what you want to get into the habit of doing, we used to call it narrative driving or narrative walking, that you always make mention. This is what people do when they're overseas and they're worried that somebody is going to put them under surveillance. As you drive down the road or as you walk down the street, you say, you're driving, you look in your rearview mirror, red Toyota Corolla, blue Honda hatchback. And you're just calling these things out. You're driving, you're calling out names of vehicles and colors. And then, let's say, an hour later, you're driving on another part of time, blue Toyota hatch. Wait a minute, I said that earlier today. and then all of a sudden your level goes up, and then you look. And it was funny, when after the Cold War fell, all the old KGB guys got with the old CIA guys, and they used to say, the CIA guys asked the KGB guys, they'd say, how did you guys know that we were conducting surveillance on you? And the KGB had the best answer. They'd come back and say, listen guys, you guys are great at changing out your disguises and using little old ladies and all of this kind of stuff and wearing fake beards and all of that, but you guys never would change your shoes. You guys would go on these operations, but you'd wear the same pair of shoes. So the KGB would do the same thing. KGB, as they were walking through the streets of Washington, D.C., would say, red and gray, pink Nike shoes, and they'd just be saying in their head, black Nike shoes. And then later on, when they were someplace in town, they'd be walking, red, gray, Nike shoes. Oh, wait a minute. I've seen her earlier today. So what you should be doing or telling your bank employees is, hey, when you're sitting at your teller window all day, look outside your window and start naming the cars. And if you get in this habit of doing this do it twice a day, what you're going to find is, we used to do this at embassies. Okay, the security people at embassies were taught, look out your window, just name the cars. Blue Toyota, gray pickup truck, white